It's Wizards versus Lesbians, a podcast for your ears. Hello and welcome to Wizards versus Lesbians. My name is Isaac.
I'm Alexis.
And today we are discussing The Water Outlaws by S.L. Huang. Would you like to recap the plot or shall I?
Well, see, my recap is it's water margin, but many of the genders have been swapped.
Yes, so this is going to become kind of the theme of the episode because Alexis is very familiar with The Water Margin, which is a classic...
One of the four great novels of classic Chinese literature.
Yes, not the one that we usually talk about, but another one of the four great classic novels of Chinese literature.
I will note that this is the second great novel, but lesbian. So, you know, we could keep going. Somebody could write Romance of the Three Kingdoms, but lesbian.
They could, yes.
And then we basically have the set, because Hong Lo Mong but lesbian is just Hong Lo Mong.
Yeah, no, I think that I think I would be into the full set, honestly. But we're delaying it. Okay, I'll do the plot.
Please do the plot.
Because the issue here is that Alexis is familiar with the original great novel of China and has read it, and I have not. And I think this is going to inform...
I have read portions of it. It's very long.
I've read the Wikipedia article. And and that's going to inform our disparate takes on this one, I think, as we go forward. So...
Honestly, the Wikipedia article on it's not bad.
Yeah, no. So we are in the Shang Dynasty?
The Song. I'm pretty sure it's the Song Dynasty.
Yeah, no. I got that confused because I had to look up what the investiture of the gods was, since you mentioned it at the end of last time's episode.
And that's about the fall of the Shang.
But yes.
No,
here we are in the Song Dynasty. For those who are keeping score, our protagonist is a drill instructor who is skilled in the art of wuxia. And this is a wuxia novel. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's a kung fu book, which is vastly oversimplifying it. But you know, this is the literature upon which the kung fu movie is, as a genre, is derived.
Okay, maybe I should try to summarize the plot. Okay,
no. I got this.
Lin Chong, who is serving as a female drill instructor and also self-defense teacher, is framed for, as in this case, and this is where it departs, is framed for assassination because she resisted a sexual assault from an important general and falls in with bandits.
Yes, he's not a general, though.
Women.
He's a...
or minister of defense.
He's some sort of government, figure.
His
lack of martial prowess is kind of an important
That's
detail.
true. It's Gao Qiu. I can't remember what his title is.
His title is Marshal, ironically. Yes, neither can I at the moment, but it's not important. He's a bastard. Yeah. He's your standard bastard.
Yes.
But anyway, so she flees the capital and falls in with a group of outlaws who are attempting to reform the kingdom from without through basically sort of Robin Hood behavior in their fortress in a mountain by the swamp, which is where the Water Outlaws comes from. They are the titular Water Outlaws.
Yes.
So she meets up with this group of very talented, mostly queer women with all kinds of interesting character traits and superpowers. And meanwhile, in the capital, the evil Grand Vizier is Cai Jing is trying to develop weapons of mass destruction with the help of our hero's friend, the world's dampest liberal, who hand-wrings her way through giving him a nuke, basically. So we have to see whether he will manage to nuke the Water Outlaws fortress or not.
Yeah, that's a...
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, great.
I got there in the end.
You did. So why should you read this? Oh, first of all, are there wizards?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
wizards
absolutely.
all over the place.
Yes.
And
are
there is
a
lesbian. The world's dampest liberal is a lesbian who manages to alienate her partner through through her craven going along to get along. And although and God knows what the sexuality of many of our characters are. I mean, it is a sort of outlaw camp full of women.
There's a wide variety of queer women, one of whom is pretty explicitly a lesbian.
Yes. Why should you read this book? Do you want to go first here?
Yeah, well, so for one thing, if, for some people, somewhat gender-swapped Water Merchant is a selling point enough. And I would say that this is mostly faithful to the spirit of the original novel with a couple of departures, which I look forward to getting into, because I think they're interesting decisions, not because I want to nitpick.
Yes.
And, this, again, is taking place as, part of the grand tradition of Chinese fiction of, rewriting and doing fan fiction of fan fiction of fan fiction of history. And, there's a lot of fun moments. If you really thought I wanted to hear Li Kuei try to kill everybody, but this time using female pronouns, this is definitely the book for you. If you want if you want anti-hero women who aren't particularly apologetic for being kind of terrible human beings, have a lot of fun committing, a lot of violence, then you will probably enjoy this book. Yes. I think there's definitely a group of people who that this is aimed at.
I would say so. I think that, I've pretty much have nothing to add to that. We have sort of a small sample size here, which is that one of us is into this kind of thing and one of us isn't. And by this kind of thing, I mean both sort of Chinese historical novels in general, wuxia, that whole gamut is like I'm a sort of a passive enjoyer, whereas you're a really active enjoyer.
No, the thing is, I'm not. Like, I don't particularly read a lot of wuxia stuff. I don't watch any of the Chinese dramas. It's just that for the last decade and change, late imperial China has been one of my professional major professional career focuses, and this novel is basically what creates the genre of vernacular fiction in late imperial China.
Yes. I say that because I think that if you have that context going in, you're probably going to get a lot more out of this. If you are familiar with the source material, if you care about the source material, you're probably going to get a lot more out of this. I found this kind of baffling.
To be fair, again, that's also kind of true of the original. Yes. But okay, so why shouldn't you read this? Well, for one thing, it's kind of baffling.
It is kind of baffling. It's overlong. It's one of those things where it's like if you enjoy Lu Da's sort of fat bumbling comic relief character, you're gonna that because there's a lot of that both at the beginning and at the end. You'll probably have a better time than I did because I wasn't into that. This is based on how I received it.
Right. No, I was just going to say, one of the reasons why you should read this book, possibly, is that this takes a lot of standard Chinese, at least, male, I'm not going to say hero, but like character types. And when it gender swaps them, pretty much that's just pronouns and to a lesser degree social role. So it is, if you're like, why can't the oversized, bumbling, not super bright martial arts monk who loves to eat too much to really be a good monk ever be a woman? Well,
yes, but I mean, and that is a fine question to ask. It's not a question that I've ever found myself asking myself. And that again, that's it. Your answer to that question will basically determine whether you are interested in reading this book or not. It's like,
right.
And mine is like, I wasn't really into this kind of thing when they were men. I don't think it's improved by them being women.
Right. But, if you're the sort of person who makes the Tumblr posts about, why can't she ever be a wet cat? Well, you'll enjoy this.
Exactly. No, you have a fine array of Blorbos who are women instead of men here.
Yes.
And so, yeah, no, there is definitely something to be said for that.
Also, tons of like this is all about very slightly homoerotic, but but otherwise non-romantic, non-sexual camaraderie.
Indeed, they're the bandits. Very much love each other, except when they're very enthusiastic about having their leader beheaded.
Yes.
There's a lot in here, which just anyway, but we'll get to that. But let's do content warnings.
There's so many. Sexual assault, cannibalism, again, being true to the source material.
Yep. I want to make a content warning about the content warning that this book has, because the author takes the opportunity of the content warning to grandstand, and to be like, well, this book contains this, this, and this, but really that shouldn't be a problem for you for these reasons. And I don't think that's a good look. I don't think that's what a content warning is for. And it also set up expectations for me, because the author was like, despite all of these horrible things happening in this book, this is going to end up being a joyous celebration of queerness. And that, I don't think it delivers on that. I think it delivers on a number of other things, but I don't think it delivers on that. So content warning, misuse of content warnings.
That actually does tie into a thing I want to talk about post-spoiler zone. So
excellent.
There's torture, there's cannibalism, there's an attempted sexual assault, there's a non-sexual but extremely abusive domestic violence type situation going on. Our extremely damp liberal, I think somewhat less harsh on her than Isaac is being, because she's very, very clearly an abused woman. It's just that the abuser is basically her dissertation advisor.
I feel for Luda. Not Luda, Lady Lu Juni. Yeah. It's yes. But anyway, we'll get to that.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, should we just go ahead and get to that? There's a lot of very unpleasant things are done in this book, and many of them are done by the protagonists.
Yep, and the rest are done to the protagonists. So, so spoiler zone.
Spoiler zone. This is the spoiler zone. This is the spoiler zone. This is the spoiler zone. Zone of the spoilers. It's the spoiler zone. Whew. Okay. Where would you like to begin? There's a lot to talk about here.
Well, actually, I want to begin with the ending, because it ties into the thing about the content warning and the one way in which I feel like this book kind of fails.
Alrighty.
Because this book, there's many things that this book does that, you might find baffling or annoying or just not your cup of tea. But I think that's fine, because that's not what it's trying to do. What it's trying to do is be water margin, but what happens if a bunch of these characters are women and most of the rest are queer, except for the bad guys who all remain men.
Yes.
And
I should mention that, the author also does this thing that often happens with gender swap books, which is that one of the characters that is allowed not to be gender swapped is like fridged, and like in a really like capital F fridged way.
One of the brothers.
The one good man gets fridged, and I'm like, that was obviously on purpose. I'm not going to be mad about it. But anyway, yes.
Right. So the thing that makes water margin one of the many things that makes water margin fascinating, is that they're obviously not heroes, and they're not even really anti-heroes. The book basically just has the premise of, what if there were 108 guys who are just really utter badasses and nobody could stop them from doing whatever they want? And wouldn't that be weird? Let's follow their adventures. Yes. And it makes it a really, interesting piece. you know, and it's inspired several other great works. And, you know, because this is the sort of thing that is, you know, it is completely unconcerned with, are these characters likable? Are these characters moral? Which means that it holds up this interesting mirror to the way that so much of our fiction, both in Imperial China and now, is supposed to be, the characters are supposed to be likable, moral, or both.
Correct.
And so when this book leans into that, I feel like it really succeeds. It's great. The scene with Li Kuei, you know, having murdered the magistrate, demanding that people bring her fake cases so that she can just murder, so she can decide who's right and who's wrong and murder them. And she's like wearing the dead magistrate's robes. I found hilarious and also very true to the source material.
Yes.
And, you know, so it really works when it does that. The problem is that the author also wants it to be a celebration of women and queer people. And so that becomes really uncomfortable. And the book ends, you know, the book only covers a portion of Water Margin. The book ends with this sort of, now we're becoming this great thing where we're going to overturn the patriarchy and, you know, possibly overthrow the emperor, or possibly just like restore the emperor's power after the, you know, evil ministers have been taking too much of it away. But, you know, it tries to make them righteous, and it doesn't work. And it really, I think, takes away some of the joyous celebration of actually women and queer people should get to be horribly problematic, incredible badasses too.
I'm so relieved to hear you say this, because like, I think that if the book had just started, right? If we hadn't had that, this book is going to be about a joyous celebration of women and queer people, right? And if the book had just started and, you know, and it was like, okay, we're not going to lean so far into, you know, whether Lean is justified in her, you know, in like turning on the empire. Like, because they make her so justified in turning on the emperor here, or turning on the empire here, not the emperor. That's an important distinction.
It is, yes. Well, you know, this is a work of Ming Dynasty vernacular fiction, and you really want to make sure you know, even though it's set in the song, you really want to make sure that you're very clear that the emperor is great. Because, you know, the emperor's eunuchs control the secret police.
That's the other disappointing thing about the ending. They shouldn't have fudged that. They should have just kept going with, you know, okay, we're actually fighting the deep state by assassinating rural judges. But it's the president is A-okay, but in our book. But anyway, I think it would have made it more interesting. But yeah, no, if there had been, it's like, if you know, when you get to the scene where they like murder the snitch and eat him in the most, you know, in the most horrific,
in the grandest tradition of Chinese like classical and vernacular fiction.
Yeah, no, and again,
like if someone's not eating baozi made of human flesh, it's not really a Chinese adventure novel.
Right. And it's like, I think that scene more than any other really sums up my problem with the book, which is this author trying to have it both ways. Which is like, you know, if that had been played for like, you know, ooh, gross out, you know, these guys are so badass comic effects, you know, like Bonzo, that would have been fine. But
here's the thing. I think it works that way because he's a snitch, because, you know, the one thing that these guys have going for them is, you know, the bonds of brotherhood. And so it's supposed to be one of these things where, you know, you get to be like so caught up in, you know, and invested in this bromance that, you know, that it's only later that you step back and go, wow, all these people are doing horrible things. So like the glorification of the bromance works fine for me. It's when it was trying to be shoehorned into more of a contemporary moral framework of this has to be about overthrowing the patriarchy.
Right. But I mean, the point that I'm making, that I was trying to make there, is not, you know, that it's really, it could have been like, you know, these guys are like, you know, who cares if this is pathetic old men? But the fact that they make Lu Da, it's the way that she says, like, this was the moment which changed everything for Lu Da, and her whole life was before this or after this. Like nodding to the fact that this is traumatic for real people, or this would be incredibly traumatic for real people, and like trying to make it, trying to sort of focus in on sort of the human stakes. That's human stakes, 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 and the sort of contemporary narrative around retribution and violence, while at the same time still just going for it, made the whole scene just like weird and clammy. And, you know, like this is a sad old man who was scared and wanted to save his wife, and I'm being remembered at that. Like, not the sort of these are some badasses who are above morality, which I can accept. It's just like when I'm being presented with this narrative that is also trying to make some sort of moral point, it's very difficult to square that.
You know, and again, that particular scene, I did not have that reaction to, because I actually sort of enjoyed briefly a moment where the author, you know, gives the reader a second to go, wow, no, these guys aren't good guys. What they're doing is actually awful. And they are telling themselves that, you know, it's this grand adventure about brotherhood. Again, that worked for me. It's when it starts to be about, because, you know, again, this is supposed to be something that sort of, I'm okay with your grand adventure that featuring horrible violence, occasionally taking a moment to show you that, no, actually this is horrible violence. But trying to say, no, this entire project really is righteous, and and ending on this triumphant note, right? Because the difference with the scene with killing and eating the husband is that that doesn't feel like the moral voice of the narrative. Mm-hmm. And it's not a triumphant moment.
No, there is that, and it's like no attempt has been made to like make the Iron Whirlwind, who is the sort of the instigator of that in that scene. Well, maybe not.
Yes.
But certainly the person who is like, I know what to do. There's mileage to like, you know, it continuously reminds us like that. Oh no, this is just a sociopath who happens to be on our side.
Right.
But
which is very much the case in the original source material, where occasionally they'll go, Li Kuei, why did you kill all these people? You know, they were really important. And Li Kuei will be like, well, why did you send me to deal with them if you didn't want them all dead? You know who I am.
Right. And it's like, you know, and I can see that being a comic character trait. And like, it's like it fits poorly with the horror to me. I don't know.
I think I'm fine with the book sort of mixing being mostly being a grand adventure and occasionally showing you moments of horror that throw you off. Like, I think that's sort of an interesting confrontational thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's the places where it tries to be about, where the bandits as a whole try to be about some sort of outer morality that isn't, you know, just their inner code, which is shown to be extremely flexible and not particularly important, but they still make a big deal about, like, big speeches about their sisterhood and things like that.
Yeah, which is like, and again, like if I was confronted with this text and that it was just the characters, you know, puffing themselves up about their morality and all of that stuff, that'd be fine. But I already had the author telling me that explicitly at the start. And so
right, and that's why I feel like the beginning and end do a lot to undermine what could be a real strength of the book. And not just the content warning, but also, you know, the beginning is all about, like, you know, makes Lin Chong to be this heroic woman who's helping teach women to protect themselves against other women, and it's because she's protecting her female friend from a predatory man that, you know, she herself becomes the target of gendered violence. And it's not that couldn't work, but in this case, I don't think it's setting you up for a different kind of story. And then it tries to end, and then the ending is trying to be the ending of the story that, that the opening promises, and nothing in the middle is really that story. And what's in the middle, I think, is more interesting.
I agree completely. And yeah, no, I enjoyed this book way more in the middle than I did at the beginning or or at the beginning or at the end.
Right. I actually feel like this book could be significantly better if you just chopped off the epilogue. I actually think the final chapter where, Li Kuei has just murdered yet another magistrate and everyone's like, oh, Li Kuei, you gotta stop killing magistrates. And Li Kuei's like, but it's so much fun. And like, you can hear the sort of the laugh track behind.
That's the denouement of a black comedy. And this book isn't
this
a black comedy.
Right. But the thing is that this could work. I feel like modern Water Martian works best as a black comedy with occasional moments of horror. And if you ignore the beginning and the end of this book, you get a really good black comedy with occasional moments of horror that really captures a lot of what's going on in the original source material. But, is, believe it or not, much more compact.
Yeah. And that is a big part of it, part of the problem. I think I would, if I were to like, the whole bit about the God's Teeth, right? Which are the MacGuffin superpower stones.
And that's the author added, but that's fine.
Yeah. It's like, I don't mind that. It's the, okay, we're going to update this and make it sort of a modern adventure story because the modern adventure story has to have a bomb that's going to go off and blow everybody up at the end unless our heroes can stop the bomb from blowing up and killing everybody at the end. And I was like, and unfortunately that also like blows the rest of the plot because as soon as I became aware of that, I'm like, okay, I can see exactly how the rest of this is going to go, which is kind of disappointing.
Yeah. That was also the other parts of the book that I didn't like as much was,
and there's a lot of it. There's a lot of it.
There is.
Yeah, it doesn't have the gonzo weirdness of the banditry stuff because it's not from the original text. And that part, because like, Lady Lu, I know that I'm being mean to her by calling her the world's dampest liberal, but that's that if you look at the book as a political allegory, and if you like me hadn't read The Water Margin and didn't know what it was before I read this book, I'm like, okay, what is this action movie about? Action movies always have political content. Well, here is why the centrist is incredibly wrong and destroys herself and her own life and gets a lot of people killed by, trying to be a centrist. Meanwhile, out here in the wilderness are heroic, revolutionaries who are queer heroic revolutionaries, but are still heroic revolutionaries are, the line that it ends on is, we are becoming the empire. It's like the empire is good. The fact that it is an empire is good. What we need is a return to benevolent totalitarian rule.
Right. And part of the thing is
via the mechanism of assassinating like low-level rural officials and kidnapping them. And
right. And again, there's a lot of cannibalism going on, and it's almost entirely by the quote-unquote good guys. It is entirely, in fact. All of the human flesh consumption happens by characters on the side of the protagonists.
Yes.
The villains being, the upper-class chancellors and grand marshals and whatever are, way too refined to eat human flesh.
I got distracted by cannibalism again. But before that, my point was it's easy to read this as a populist reactionary wish fulfillment for militias. And maybe we're at the point where that's preferable, but it's not gonna be the gays in charge. Now let's talk about the Chancellor. What's his name again? Tsai something?
Tsai Jing.
Tsai Jing. Yeah, it's instructive to put him next to Wang Baoxiang, who is a similar kind of character, the effete calligrapher, political mastermind behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And like how the one book handles that character and what he means and what his feelings are, and how this book handles it. And it's not, I'm not saying that this book is bad because it doesn't give Tsai Jing depth. That's not what this book is trying to do. It's more that, that's a much more that the He Who Drowned the World problematizes that stereotype in a way that's actually interesting in relating to queerness, right?
Yeah.
Whereas this guy's sort of queer-codedness is left completely unremarked upon in a way that.
Well, but the thing is that this gets back to my point about he who. She who became the sun, he who drowned the world, which is that he's not queer-coded by traditional Chinese standards. This is like a kind of hero. This is the, like, I mean, he's old, but, people like him when he was younger, people like Wang Baoxiang, those are the romantic heroes. It's, the people who, it's not the big buff bandits who are generally romantic heroes. It's the people who are cultured and effete and really, and intelligent and dress nicely and have beautiful calligraphy and, are at least have at least a Jinshu degree. And, that's who the romantic heroes are. Like, to the point that it gets parodied in Hong Lo Meng.
Sure.
And so, so like, She Became the Sun, He Drowned the World does a great job in interrogating the ways that this is one kind of masculinity that is romantic in one setting, but if you're in a different cultural context, just really sucks and becomes queer-coded. And I'm actually okay with this book not trying to treat Cai Jing as queer-coded, because he's not queer-coded. The thing is that gender roles and what defines masculine and feminine varies widely from culture to culture.
That is an interesting point, and it's just interesting to me coming at it from like a Western perspective, as it were, that like he is so or maybe just a Disney perspective, because this is a character.
Right, he's absolutely a queer-coded Disney villain.
He's Jafar,
Right. It is also worth noting that Cai Jing and Gao Qiu were real people. So this is kind of like,
Richard
Taft
III
or Taft.
Sure. Oh, William Howard Taft, he got stabbed in the gut with a big spear, half Jim Sherman. At his side, wiggled it around till the big man died. But yes, no, it's some fun character assassination on top of everything else. But yeah, no, it's but that you see the sort of the difficulty. The difficulty is not in the political reality of the original text or the political reality of this time and place. The difficulty is in the book trying to connect that political reality with this one, and spending quite a long time of it without actually succeeding.
Yeah, which is, and I definitely think that that's the book's biggest weakness.
I think I would have enjoyed it more if it had just gone full Tomoe Gozen with it and was like, fuck this effete nonsense. Let's, the heroes who chop everything up are super cool and they're above morality. I'd be like, okay, I respect that.
Right, but again, I think it's fine for a book to be complex. I think you're right. It's when the book starts to read like it is commenting on contemporary politics, particularly because if you do take it as that, and I feel like you're primed to do so by this is a celebration of women and queer folk, then you're like, well, okay, but these revolutionaries are eating human flesh,
yes.
And torturing people and murdering rural judges
and I also, having read like what the plot synopsis of the original, I would have liked it if it, I think it would have been a better book if the epilogue had been, and then they went on to put down some other revolutions and repel some invasions, and then they eventually die.
The book ends with most of them dying. Right. The book, because part of the interesting thing about the book is, being written in this context of a fairly authoritarian imperial state, is that, it does a lot of, oh, well, the emperor is good. And it does have to sort of, what do you do with people like this? Well, from the point of view of an emperor, well, eventually you either have to kill them all or you have to, send them off to fight off the Jin, at which point they're all still going to die.
Yes.
So, which I think you can say that that's all right, well, you can have your immoral behavior, but your characters still have to suffer. But I think it's also just, that's the natural ending of people who live this way.
Yeah.
Right? When Lin Chong kills the other, is, kills and claims that she's being forced to kill. Except I do like that the book actually takes a moment to be like, she probably could have done this in a way that didn't kill her, but she was tired.
Right, exactly.
You know, and like, again, that, for me, that worked. But what do you know, how do you handle these sort of people? Well, eventually, this is not a lifestyle that leads to a happy, you know, empowering revolutionary ending.
This actually feeds pretty naturally into a thing that I wanted to bring up.
Great.
Because you and I have spent a fair amount of time off mic talking about mafia movies before.
Ah, yes. Which this podcast being staunchly anti-glorification of the mafia.
Right. And I would argue that, you know, when you get people, you know, a story about the heroics or at least, you know, cool ass deeds of people who are, you know, let's be real, like most of this whole like robbing from the rich and giving to the poor bit is at least partially propaganda, right? This is a band of outlaws who are stealing from people. I guess it is sort of giving them a little bit of credit to call them organized crime.
Right. See, that's an important distinction.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask. It's like, how do you handle like stories about pirates, you know, stories about the mafia, stories about heroic outlaws and bandits? Like, how do you finesse that? And is it just that it has to be at a certain historical remove? Well,
I think that it helps that it, you know, being at a certain historical remove, because, you know, the mafia is still very much a thing, and bandits really of this style are not. You know, and I mean, you could argue that this is still glorifying like the existence of armed paramilitary groups, but it's a different thing, is. Right? Like, right. But you know, like it is. But that's still a different thing, because the mafia is an actual group, and making them seem like they are these honorable criminals who would never sell drugs to children, when actually they, you know, deal in a lot of child pornography and other things that are, you know, very harmful to children, is, you know, creating an atmosphere that makes it easier for organized crime to exist, and for people to, you know, be, I don't know, like, I don't want to be like, oh, the existence of stories glorifying the mafia enable the mafia. I just don't like them, because actually the mafia is awful.
Yeah, no, I'm not trying to get you in a moral gotcha or anything like that. It's just
right.
Like,
no. I'm thinking aloud. I'm working stuff out, you know, as I talk. Mm-hmm. But you know, I think part of it is, I think a historical remove actually does make a big difference. There's a reason that this was written in the Ming and set in the Song, and you know, and that we're reading it now in in another country, but also in another dynasty.
That would be the Ping dynasty, under the flag of the Pantsless Bear. And
I do also, I mean, again, part of the thing actually is that, and this is why I like the fact that there's these occasional moments of horror, is that this book doesn't, even when the narrative is saying, oh, these guys are so revolutionary and empowering, and, you know, isn't it great to see, you know, a girl boss win or whatever.
You said it. I'm glad you said it, because that means that I don't have to say it.
Yes. Yeah. The thing is, but it's not saying, oh, we're bandits, but we're too noble to, you know, kill and eat people. Yeah. It's, in fact, you know, we're too noble to kill a snitch. We would just, you know, give him a stern talking to or whatever. No, they kill him and then they eat him, because just killing him is not enough.
No, they torture him to death in the most horrific way that they can think of.
Right. You know, and when there's a leadership struggle, it is resolved via armed combat, and everybody, even the people who were really supporting their leader before, are like, yeah, cut off her head.
Yeah, I was like,
that is a real difference between, you know, The Godfather, where he's going, well, I don't want to, you know, well, we can sell drugs, but I don't want them near schools.
Right. I think I that's an excellent answer to that question. And I agree. I'm a hypocrite here, 'cause I still like Yakuza movies, Beat Takeshi's sonatine is in my top 5. I think it's one of those sort of weird shifts in tone thing where it's like this same bandit group goes from, cheering when their first leader gets her head cut off and, being plunged into mourning when their second leader gets killed. Although I understand it's completely different, circumstances under which it happened. And she was a better leader, yes. But yeah, no, I think, what I would have appreciated actually is, that, I mean, I think part of the problem here is that it doesn't succeed in making, and maybe this makes it a better book from a moral perspective, but it doesn't, I think, succeed in making that sort of cathartic violence joyful in a lot of cases. And that again is my problem with the torture scene. When Liu finally gets her chance and mashes Cai Jing's innards up with the thing that has impaled him. Besides being, wonderfully gruesome. I'm like, she doesn't even enjoy that. The author has done a good job of making Lady Liu into this burned out shell of a human being who can barely feel anything anymore because she's just been harassed and terrorized into pure reactivity. And I just don't, I think that it's an odd thing to bring realism to these situations in that way, without...
well, and I don't even think it needed to be joyful, but I think that it needed to be more cathartic.
Right, exactly.
I think you're right that the catharsis doesn't end up being there.
And it's like, if you do sort of view this whole thing as being a very sort of sneaky treatise, despite the disclaimer at the top, if you view this thing as being a treatise about the horrors of vengeance and, you in attacking, beating the empire, you become the empire. That's the last line. We are the empire now.
Right.
Then that's right. Because you're not, a person in that situation for real would feel very little at that point besides the numbing horror of it all. But that doesn't feel like what the book is trying to do.
Yeah. And I think that part of it actually is that in a lot of, the book in many places does do I enjoyed the way that it sort of juggles horror with black comedy. But, I guess part of it's that the ending is neither. And it could go either way, but because it's trying to be triumphant, I don't even think that it really pulls off being triumphant.
Yes.
So. And again, I enjoyed this book.
Yeah, I enjoyed parts of it. Actually, shall we do a sort of reverse grumpy zone where I talk about some of the little things that I liked?
Yes.
Grumpy zone. I enjoyed the there are a bunch of little notes and little turns of phrase that I thought were really enjoyable. The fact that I really enjoyed the character of the mad Taoist priestess, Fenrong. No.
Renfang.
Renfang, yes.
She's a Rinxia priestess. And yes. I'm actually blanking on her name as well right now.
Fan
Rui.
Feng Rui. There we go. We got it. I thought her character was there's a character that I can get behind in terms of my cathartic, mad revenge spiral, business. But I liked that the bullshit that she fed Liu to prevent her from seeing what her real plan was that they're going to reverse the polarity of the MacGuffin. It's yes. Star Trek and you're doing something with the deflector array. I was like, when I first heard that, I was like, is that really what we're doing? And it's like, oh no, it's not really what we're doing. That was supposed to be bullshit. I appreciated that a lot. I liked little turns of phrase, the Imperial invasion force is described as being a fitted mosaic of well-oiled men,
Yes.
which is that's too funny not to be on purpose. Later, the in the rural magistrate's office, it is described as a haze of no, that's not in the rural. It's there's something that's described as a haze of decapitation. Again, like I really wish that this was like 10% more gonzo. I think I would have gotten it if it had been like 10% more gonzo and a little bit less, interested in sort of the mire of depression and the cost of violence.
Yes. I do think this book falls into this trap that a lot of the books we've covered fall into, which is that it's really hard to write about depression without it being as boring as depression actually is. And so, I thought that Lu Junyi's falling into increasing depression as she's in this increasingly awful abusive relationship was fairly well depicted, but it dragged because there reaches a point where there's not much more you can say other than it's happening again and it's happening again and it's happening again.
Yeah, no, exactly correct. And yeah, no, I just really I pretty much just enjoyed the stuff that happened with the Water Outlaws, the titular, Water Outlaws. Like all of their infighting and their deeds of daring do and all of that stuff. It was pretty much just everything that wasn't that failed to work for me.
Yeah, and I thought the author again did a really good job of bringing a lot of that over into English in a way that really worked.
Yeah, I agree. So I don't know if you know the answer to this question, but the people of the 16 winds bit, people who live alternately as men and women, is there any historical
not that I know of, but I mean, I was a legal historian, so unless they got arrested for it and probably murdered because I studied capital punishment, so I can tell you a lot about what it would have been like to be that magistrate who got murdered, but I actually didn't. I very specifically avoided studying anything involving women and queer people because everyone kept trying to get me to.
This makes sense to me. I think that that was probably made up, but I think it's very cool.
Yeah. The thing is that I think that my guess is that it is a nod to a lot of, different, that there's, a lot of long tradition in China of there being different kinds of gender expression and homosexuality and stuff like that, which wasn't formally criminalized until the Qing. But I've never heard that particular phrase. Not that I necessarily would, because again, not my area.
Sure. Well, I couldn't find a reference to the 16 winds, but apparently in China to this day, there's a word for homosexuality, because the South is where it all begins. It might be referred to as the southern wind. Kind of like the British call syphilis the French disease, I guess. I like the fact that their genius tactician has gambler's fallacy.
Yes.
That was really cute. I'm just going to be repeating what I said over and over again, which is just like, I would have liked it to lean more one way or the other. Either make the bandits revel in their amorality, or make it a real dark story about violence.
And again, I actually kind of like when stuff wavers.
Yeah,
because I think that you can evoke some really interesting emotions and reader experiences that way that you can't get when you lean into something one or the other.
And that is often the case. I think it's possibly just that one of the things that is grafted onto this book, which is the whole parts with the magic and the nukes and the exploding and the
right.
Is just doesn't work for me in any form. So.
Yeah, and then that's also true for me. Those were definitely the least interesting parts. I honestly liked a lot of the character relationships. I liked how I mean, for one, I liked how Lin Chong is actually kind of a terrible judge of character. You know, she immediately swears this bond of undying sisterhood to somebody who's promptly feels insecure and starts plotting behind her back while she, refuses to trust the person who's clearly going to be the next leader.
Yes.
And who seems to be the one who's most committed to like making things more the way that that she wants them to be, more disciplined and things like that.
Yeah, no, Lin Chong, I really enjoyed Lin Chong's character, just, across the board. I think the book did a really good job of doing a really sort of diverse, swathe of different character archetypes, and not just archetypes, but, well, I guess none of them are really super deep, but, different types. And also it's really funny that that the characters that they did not do that for were all the men. They just left them. The ones that they left ungender swapped were the ones that they didn't give any interesting, characterization to, which I appreciated.
I enjoyed that the genius tactician just doesn't have a named gender. Like, that's actually there's a fairly adept bit of writing.
Yeah, no, that worked out real well.
They're just never using pronouns, which must be also a nod to the fact that at least modern spoken Mandarin doesn't have pronouns. Doesn't have gendered pronouns. Obviously, it has pronouns.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't, ta is just ta.
Mm-hmm. I will say that, we said at the end, like, we should have more gender swapped lesbian Chinese classic novels. I really do want
Elements of the Three Kingdoms.
I want Investiture of the Gods, based on what I was reading about that. That looked really interesting.
Actually, so now we're going to get into extremely self-indulgent Grumpy Zone, because this is very much there was no Shiman Ching and there was no Pan Jinlian, which means that we have not yet, planted the seeds for lesbian Jinping Mei, Plum in the Golden Vase, which is, considered the unofficial fifth great novel of classic Chinese literature, and is in fact pornographic water margin fanfic.
Someday. Maybe even the sequel to this book, who knows. But I did also want to say that, like, you've mentioned before that a lot of these stories end with Guan Yin descending from the heavens and fixing everything to give it all a happy
that's
ending.
mostly just Journey West.
Okay, that is
a lot of these stories. A lot of these stories end with everyone dying.
Everyone dying. But I think that's par for the course for a lot of
right.
For a lot of writing from this period of history. It's write what you know. But I would really enjoy a let's do a gender swapped Journey to the West where Guan Yin is a dude. How about that?
Well, I mean that's just Buddhism.
Oh yeah. Never mind. That's not as interesting as I was hoping.
Like, okay, that's just Guan Yin and when she's a male bodhisattva. Okay,
yeah,
sure.
Yeah, that was more interesting in my head, I guess.
Because, like, Isaac, if what you want is male, compassionate, but bodhisattva figures, I have some really good news for you.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I'm just gonna have to eat that one, I think. Yeah, but I mean, and honestly, this is the last positive thing that I will say about this book is that there is a certain satisfaction to watching the gradual dissolution of a good liberal who is forced to work at Lockheed Martin.
Right. Also that
there's a certain sick joy to that, and I would be lying if I said that I didn't feel it.
And again, I think I still would, even though the book is very long and meandering, I would still recommend giving it a try if, the content warnings don't, or possibly the content warning as framed, don't put you off, because this book is weird and interesting. And, this is what we keep saying we want, is more weird and interesting stuff that gives us complicated reactions.
True, but it's, but I guess
you're not going to like all of them. That's part of the point of having weird books.
Yeah, I agree completely with both sides of that. And part of it is, I wish it could have been weirder. The original book starts with finding 108, soul gems under a turtle. We could have had that instead of the content warning. Why not?
Also, let's get lesbian gender swap Tekenden. I'm totally saying this because I want to read it and not because it would also really help one of my books sell better.
Hakenden. We wouldn't have Dragon Ball without Hakenden. We wouldn't have Inuyasha without Hakenden. The tale of the 8 dogs, in which a virtuous princess is forced to marry the family dog and gets spiritually pregnant, thankfully not actually pregnant. And then when she's murdered, the 8 dog spirits leave her body and enter the 8 dog warriors, who then have to, find the crystals or something. Anyway, in the gender swap, Inagami Kurone should play one of the dog warriors.
Also, this is my one plug, which I'm going to do shamelessly. But if you want to learn more about the history of water margin, water margin and its importance in creating this genre of vernacular literature and widespread printing, you can download for free Bandits in Print by Scott Gregory. It is open access, and so you can read it for free.
Please support open access academic publishing.
Yes.
Yep. No, I'm totally with you on that one.
Thank you. I know that I understand that this is, one of our more, this has for me gotten to be one of the more self-indulgent ones, and I appreciate your patience, Isaac.
There was never a possibility, given what this book was, that would not be the case.
Right.
Let's be real here. And
I should note my Chinese my Chinese surname given to me by my college girlfriend comes from this book.
Yeah, Shimen, right there. I'm gonna do the classic, end of podcast thing where I was like, I've spent a lot of this podcast complaining about this book. I stand by my complaints, but I would rather read this one than a whole host of other ones that we've done because, as you say, it is strange.
Yes.
And very cool in places, and the writing was good. I just, there's I think that there was also just a part of me that just is like, I don't really like superhero stuff and kung fu stuff, and that's just me, and it's an extra thing for this book to overcome,
Right. No, and that's totally legit. And I think your criticisms were, again, mostly on point. I agree that I think part of the thing that holds this book back from being better is that, and probably a lot of this has to do with the modern publishing industry and what's expected, but that this book, I would have liked this book to be allowed to be as weird as it could have been.
I agree completely. So, on that note, next on the podcast feed should be Stakes, if we have done our math correctly.
I believe the next one is Stakes.
That is the Adventure Time miniseries, and I'm looking forward to that, since it's our 75th episode, and we're going to do a cartoon every 25 episodes. Apparently, we've decided.
Yes.
And if you guys want to have anything that you would like us to do for our 100th episode that isn't She-Ra, and I'm not saying that because She-Ra is bad. I'm saying that because it needs to be short enough that we can actually watch the whole thing. Do let us know if you have any requests.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for letting me talk about Chinese history for an hour.
It's always a pleasure. I mean, to me at least. I mean, I like this podcast. That's the reason why I do it.
Me too.
Hopefully some other people do too. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.